Juniper Black was hired to track a killer through the frontier, but every step she took brought her closer to the truth her clients never saw coming. They weren't paying her to find the killer, they were paying her to get close. The stagecoach rattled to a halt, its wooden wheels protesting against the uneven ground outside the Harmony Gulch Railroad outpost. Dust billowed, momentarily obscuring the rough-hewn buildings and the anxious faces peering from windows and doorways. A lone figure stepped down, a woman whose presence immediately commanded attention. Juniper Black, her name preceded her, whispered with a mixture of respect and apprehension. She was known for her uncanny tracking abilities, a skill honed in the unforgiving wilderness. Her face, weathered and etched with lines that spoke of hardship, was framed by dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. Her eyes, the color of flint, missed nothing. She wore practical buckskins, a worn leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat that shielded her from the harsh sun. A rifle rested easily across her shoulder, and a revolver hung low on her hip. She moved with a quiet confidence, a predator entering a cage of nervous prey. The outpost foreman, a burly man named O'Malley, hurried forward, wiping sweat from his brow. "Miss Black, we're obliged you came so quick. Things are tense." Juniper nodded curtly, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She took in the hastily erected wooden structures, the nervous guards patrolling the perimeter, and the palpable fear hanging in the air. "Show me where it happened," she said, her voice low and steady, cutting through the anxious murmur. O'Malley swallowed hard and led her towards a small, blood-stained tent on the edge of the camp. The hunt had begun. Juniper Black, the tracker, had arrived. The blood-stained tent flap hung open, a grim testament to the violence that had gripped Harmony Gulch. Juniper knelt, examining the ground, her fingers tracing the faint outlines of boot prints. O'Malley hovered nervously. "Terrible business, Miss Black, terrible. We've lost good men." "Who hired you?" Juniper asked, her voice devoid of emotion. The Railroad Consortium, a group of them bigwigs back in Chicago. Mr. Harrison, Mr. Sterling, Mr. Davies. O'Malley rattled off the names like a litany. "They're pushing this line through, see, connecting the coasts, but these incidents, they're setting us back something fierce." Later that evening, inside the makeshift office, Juniper sat across from O'Malley. A telegram lay on the table, its message crisp and to the point: "Stop the killings. EXPNSES no object." It was signed by Harrison, Sterling, and Davies. "They're worried about more than just good men, aren't they?" Juniper observed, her gaze unwavering. O'Malley wrung his hands. "They're losing money, Miss Black, lots of it. Every day this line's delayed, it's thousands down the drain. And the investors. They're getting spooked, they need this stopped. Now," he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They said to offer you whatever you want, just find the killer, before he shuts us down for good." Juniper simply nodded, her expression unreadable. The stakes were clear: money, power, and desperation. And she, Juniper Black, was the only one who knew the real game being played. Back at the blood-stained tent, Juniper meticulously examined the scene. The victim, a young surveyor named Thomas, lay sprawled amid scattered maps and surveying equipment. Juniper knelt, her fingers gently probing the wound, a clean knife thrust, quick and efficient. "Anything?" O'Malley asked, his voice hushed. Juniper rose, her gaze distant. The killer knew what he was doing. This wasn't a random act. She circled the tent, her eyes scanning the surrounding ground. She pointed to a set of tracks leading away from the scene. "These are interesting. Size 12 boots heading west. Notice the slight drag on the left foot. Limp, perhaps." She paused, seemingly lost in thought. "And look here." She pointed to a small, almost invisible fleck of fabric snagged on a thorny bush. "Blue wool, not common around here." O'Malley scribbled in his notebook. "A limp, size 12 boots, blue wool. I'll get the men looking." Juniper watched him, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. The limp was real, she'd made sure of that, scuffing her own boot as she left the tent after her grim task. The blue wool, a scrap she'd conveniently found earlier that day near the supply wagon, conveniently belonging to a disgruntled worker known for his gambling debts. It was a clumsy, obvious lead designed to be found. Let them chase shadows. While they hunted a phantom, Juniper would continue her own, far more personal pursuit. The false lead had its intended effect. A wave of suspicion washed over the outpost, directed at poor, limping Jedediah, the card player with the unfortunate habit of wearing blue wool. Men whispered, eyes darting nervously in his direction, but the fear extended far beyond Jedediah. Harmony Gulch had always been a place of hard work and isolation, but now a palpable paranoia permeated the air. The vast, empty landscape that once represented opportunity now felt like a suffocating cage. Every shadow seemed to conceal a potential threat, every rustle of wind carried the whisper of danger. Men who had once shared jokes and stories around the campfire now kept to themselves, their faces grim and guarded. The communal meals were eaten in silence, punctuated only by the clatter of utensils and the nervous coughs of men struggling to maintain composure. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by nightmares and the ever-present fear of a knife in the dark. The guards doubled their patrols, their lanterns casting flickering shadows that danced and distorted, amplifying the sense of unease. They scanned the perimeter with increasing desperation, their rifles held tight, but they knew deep down that they were protecting against something they couldn't see, a fear that had taken root in their minds and was slowly consuming them. Even the weather seemed to conspire against them. The wind howled relentlessly, carrying with it the mournful cries of coyotes, a constant reminder of their vulnerability in this desolate, unforgiving land. Harmony Gulch was a pressure cooker, and the pressure was building. While chaos simmered around her, Juniper Black remained an island of calm. As the men of Harmony Gulch succumbed to fear and suspicion, she moved with a deliberate, almost glacial pace, her focus unwavering. She began interviewing the workers, one by one, her questions precise and probing. She listened intently to their rambling accounts, sifting through the fear and conjecture to glean any kernel of truth. Her voice was low and steady, her gaze unwavering, offering a strange sense of reassurance in the midst of the turmoil. "Tell me everything you saw," she'd say, her voice gentle but firm, "no matter how insignificant it may seem." And they would, pouring out their anxieties and suspicions, their words a jumbled mess of half-truths and outright fabrications. Juniper absorbed it all, her mind a steel trap, sorting and cataloging every detail. She spent hours poring over maps, examining supply manifests, and scrutinizing the daily routines of the workers. She moved with an economy of motion, her actions precise and efficient. She ate little, slept less, and spoke only when necessary. Her methodical approach was a stark contrast to the surrounding panic. While the others were consumed by fear, Juniper was consumed by purpose. While they saw shadows and monsters, she saw patterns and connections. And with each passing hour, she moved closer to her goal, her actions fueled by a cold, unwavering resolve. To the men of Harmony Gulch, she was a beacon of hope, a professional dispatched to quell their fears. They had no idea she was the storm itself. The image flashed in her mind, unbidden and unwelcome. A log cabin bathed in the crimson glow of a raging fire, screams piercing the night, the acrid smell of smoke and blood, faces contorted in fear and rage. Juniper blinked, the vision receding as quickly as it had come. She was standing by the supply wagon, checking the inventory, her face an impassive mask. But inside, the memories churned, a toxic brew of grief and fury. It had been years since the massacre at Willow Creek, but the scars remained, etched deep into her soul. She had been just a girl then, a witness to unspeakable brutality. Her family gone, her life stolen. She pushed the memories back, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. The supply wagon, the dwindling provisions, the faces of the men she was sworn to protect. But the image lingered, a constant reminder of the debt she had come to collect. A hand touched her arm. "O'Malley. You all right, Miss Black? You seemed distant." Juniper met his gaze, her eyes hard and cold. "I'm fine, just thinking." Thinking about the fire, thinking about the screams, thinking about the faces, thinking about the men who had escaped justice, thinking about how close she was to settling the score. The flashback was a stark reminder of her purpose, a glimpse into the inferno that fueled her every action. It was a secret she guarded closely, a burden she carried alone. It was the key to understanding Juniper Black. The news spread like wildfire, another body. This time it was Sila's, the gruff cook. Found face down in the flour bin, a knife protruding from his back. The panic intensified, threatening to erupt into full-blown hysteria. Juniper arrived at the scene, her face a mask of professional concern. The flour dust coated everything, giving the scene a ghostly pallor. She surveyed the body, noting the angle of the wound, the position of the limbs. "Looks like a struggle," she observed, her voice calm and measured. "See the overturned pots, the spilled flour," he fought back. She examined the knife. Common issue used for chopping vegetables, nothing remarkable. She glanced around the cramped kitchen, her eyes scanning every detail. Then she found it, tucked beneath a stack of dirty dishes, a crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully, her expression unreadable. "A gambling debt," she announced, her voice flat. "Sila's owed money to Jedediah." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Jedediah, already under suspicion for the previous murder, was now the prime suspect. Juniper had expertly tightened the noose, ensuring that all eyes were focused on him. As O'Malley led Jedediah away, Juniper watched, her face betraying nothing. The fear and suspicion swirling around them was a smokescreen, obscuring her own actions. The men of Harmony Gulch were chasing shadows, while she methodically eliminated her targets one by one. Each death was a step closer to fulfilling her vow, a drop of blood repaying the debt owed from Willow Creek. And Jedediah, the hapless scapegoat, was simply collateral damage. A fresh telegram arrived, crackling with impatience. JDDIH in custody. Is he the killer? Progress REPORTS DEMANDED. DELAYS unacceptable. It was signed again by Harrison, Sterling, and Davies. O'Malley paced nervously. "They're breathin' down my neck, Miss Black. They want answers. They want this stopped, and they want it now." Juniper took the telegram, her face betraying nothing. "Jedediah is a convenient suspect," she said, her voice flat, "but I'm not convinced he's the only one involved." "What do you mean?" O'Malley asked, his voice laced with anxiety. "There are inconsistencies, details that don't quite add up. I need more time." O'Malley wrung his hands. "I don't know how much more time I can buy you. They're threatening to send their own men out here, men who won't be so patient." Juniper met his gaze, her eyes as cold as the winter wind. "Tell them I'm close. Tell them I have a plan. Tell them the line will be completed, one way or another." She knew she was walking a tightrope. The railroad barons were powerful men, used to getting what they wanted. Their patience was wearing thin and their desperation was growing. But Juniper needed them to remain in the dark, to continue believing in her fabricated narrative. She needed them to trust her just a little longer. Because soon, very soon, they would realize that the true threat wasn't lurking in the shadows of Harmony Gulch. It was standing right in front of them. Juniper drafted a telegram, her words carefully chosen to convey a sense of progress while concealing the truth. JDDIH primary suspect. Evidence mounting. Believe he is working with an accomplice, possibly within the survey crew. Investigating RUMORS of sabotage and discontent. Expect a breakthrough soon. She handed it to O'Malley. "Send this. It should keep them satisfied for now." The telegram was a calculated gamble, a carefully constructed narrative designed to appease the railroad barons' anxieties. It acknowledged Jedediah's involvement, lending credence to their initial suspicions, but it also introduced the possibility of a wider conspiracy, hinting at sabotage and internal strife. This served two purposes. It shifted the focus away from Juniper herself, and it provided a convenient explanation for any further delays or setbacks. She knew that Harrison, Sterling, and Davies were businessmen, not detectives. They were more concerned with results than with the intricacies of the investigation. As long as they believed she was making progress, they would continue to trust her. The beauty of her plan was its simplicity. She was feeding them a story they wanted to hear, a story that confirmed their own prejudices and fears. It was a masterful act of deception, a carefully orchestrated performance that allowed her to continue her deadly work, unimpeded and undetected. Each telegram, each fabricated clue was a thread in the web she was weaving, a web that would ultimately ensnare her true prey. The barons would soon realize they were not paying for justice, but for their own demise. This time the memory was clearer, sharper, more agonizing. Juniper was no longer a distant observer, she was reliving the nightmare. She remembered the faces of the men who had stormed the cabin, their eyes glinting with malice. She remembered their laughter, their taunts, their casual cruelty. She saw her father, fighting bravely to protect his family, cut down in cold blood. She saw her mother, shielding her with her body, whispering words of love and courage as the flames engulfed them. And she saw the faces of the men she was now hunting. Thomas, the surveyor, laughing as he set fire to the barn. Silas, the cook, holding down her younger brother as the others, she clenched her fists, her knuckles white. The memory was almost unbearable, a searing pain that threatened to consume her. She had survived by hiding, by playing dead amidst the carnage. She had crawled out of the wreckage, a broken child with a burning desire for revenge. She had spent years tracking them, learning their habits, their weaknesses, their secrets. She knew their names, their faces, their crimes, and now she was finally ready to make them pay. The railroad barons, in their ignorance, had handed her the perfect opportunity. They had given her access, resources, and a legitimate reason to be in Harmony Gulch. They had unwittingly placed themselves at her mercy, and soon they would learn the true cost of their ambition. The victims of Willow Creek would finally have their justice, and Juniper Black would finally find peace, or so she hoped. Another night, another scream. This time it was Ben, the foreman's assistant. He was found near the stables, his throat cut, a playing card, the jack of spades, clutched in his hand. Juniper arrived, her face ashen but her eyes sharp and focused, the jack of spades. Jedediah had a fondness for cards, a well-known fact within the camp. The message was clear. Jedediah was taunting them, reveling in his crimes. She examined the scene with practiced efficiency. The ground was muddy, churned up by the horses. She found a set of footprints leading away from the body, matching Jedediah's distinctive limp. She even discovered a small wooden carving, a crude replica of a spade, hidden beneath a pile of hay. Jedediah was known for his whittling. The evidence was overwhelming, damning. There was no doubt in anyone's mind, Jedediah was the killer. O'Malley, his face a mask of grief and anger, ordered an immediate search for the fugitive. The men of Harmony Gulch, fueled by fear and vengeance, were ready to hunt him down like an animal. Juniper watched them ride out, their faces grim and determined. The net was tightening. Jedediah was trapped, a pawn in her game of revenge. He would pay for the crimes of others, a sacrifice to appease the ghosts of Willow Creek. And with each passing death, Juniper felt a flicker of satisfaction, a sense of closure. But she knew her work was far from over. The biggest targets were still waiting. And she was running out of time. News of Jedediah's apparent guilt, telegraphed to Chicago, brought a palpable sense of relief to the railroad barons. The killings, it seemed, were finally coming to an end. The disruption to their precious timeline, the threat to their financial empire, was fading into the past. Harrison, Sterling, and Davies exchanged congratulatory telegrams, patting themselves on the back for their decisive action in hiring Juniper Black. They saw her as a miracle worker, a savior who had rescued their project from the brink of disaster. They began to relax, their anxieties easing, their focus shifting back to the logistics of completing the railroad. They authorized the release of funds for additional supplies, expedited the shipment of materials, and even planned a celebratory visit to Harmony Gulch to mark the imminent completion of the line. They were so close they could almost taste it. Unbeknownst to them, they were walking into a trap. Their complacency was a dangerous illusion, a carefully cultivated facade that concealed the true danger lurking beneath the surface. They believed they were in control, that they had successfully navigated the crisis. But in reality, they were puppets in Juniper's deadly game, their strings being pulled by a vengeful hand. They had no idea that the true killer was not a disgruntled worker with a limp and a fondness for cards. The true killer was the woman they had entrusted with their lives, the woman who was now meticulously plotting their demise. They were about to learn that some debts can only be paid in blood. The vision consumed her, a swirling vortex of fire and blood. This time there were no fragmented images, no blurred faces. This time Juniper saw everything, felt everything, relived every agonizing moment of the Willow Creek massacre. She saw the riders approaching, their faces masked with bandanas, their weapons glinting in the sunlight. She heard their shouts, their threats, their promises of violence. She felt the terror that gripped her as they dragged her family from their home, accusing them of what? A land dispute, a petty grievance? It didn't matter. They wanted blood. She watched as they lined up her father, her mother, her two younger brothers. She saw the first shot, the second, the third. The screams echoed in her ears, a symphony of pain and despair. And then the fire. They soaked the cabin in kerosene, setting it ablaze with a casual flick of a match. She remembered the heat, the smoke, the suffocating darkness. She remembered the feeling of her skin blistering, her lungs burning. She remembered the last words her mother whispered, "Survive, remember." The memory faded, leaving Juniper trembling, her body slick with sweat. The full horror of that night was now undeniably clear. It wasn't just a massacre, it was an act of pure, unadulterated evil, and the men responsible were not just faceless bandits, they were monsters. Her motive was no longer a secret even to herself. It was vengeance, plain and simple. a burning desire to make those monsters pay for what they had done. And she wouldn't rest until every last one of them was dead. The railroad barons had made a grave mistake when they hired Juniper Black. They had unleashed a force of nature, a storm of vengeance that would soon engulf them all. Harrison arrived first, his private railcar gleaming in the harsh sunlight. He stepped down, a portly man in an expensive suit, his face radiating self-importance. O'Malley greeted him with nervous deference, eager to please the man who held his livelihood in his hands. Juniper stood back, watching, her expression unreadable. Harrison approached her, extending his hand. "Miss Black, I presume, I must say we are deeply indebted to you. You've done remarkable work." Juniper shook his hand, her grip firm. "Just doing my job, Mr. Harrison." As they spoke, Juniper unconsciously touched the silver locket she always wore beneath her shirt. It was a memento from her mother, the only thing she had salvaged from the wreckage of Willow Creek. A small, almost imperceptible detail, but it didn't escape Harrison's notice. He frowned, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He had seen that locket before, years ago on a little girl at Willow Creek. A girl who had somehow survived the fire. He excused himself, his face pale. He retreated to his railcar, rummaging through his briefcase. He pulled out an old newspaper clipping, a grainy photograph of the victims of the Willow Creek massacre. And there in the arms of her mother was a little girl wearing a silver locket. He looked back at Juniper, his eyes widening in horror. He knew who she was, he knew what she was planning, and he knew that he and his partners were next. The hunter had become the hunted, the game had changed. And the railroad barons were about to pay the ultimate price for their past sins. Harrison emerged from the railcar, his face a mask of fear and desperation. He beckoned Juniper to follow him, away from O'Malley and the curious eyes of the workers. He led her to a secluded spot behind the railcar, his voice trembling. "Juniper Black, or should I say Juniper Willow Creek?" Juniper's face remained impassive, her eyes cold and hard. "So you remember." "I remember everything," Harrison said, his voice barely a whisper. "The fire, the screams, the children." "You were there," Juniper stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "You watched them die." "It wasn't my fault," Harrison pleaded, his eyes darting nervously. "It was Sterling and Davies. They ordered it. I was just following orders." "Excuses," Juniper spat, her voice laced with contempt. "That's all I've heard for years. Excuses from men who thought they could get away with murder." "What do you want?" Harrison asked, his voice cracking. "Money, I'll give you anything, just don't hurt me." Juniper smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. "Money? I don't care about your money, I care about justice. I care about the lives you stole, and now you're going to pay for what you did." Harrison's eyes widened in terror. He knew he was trapped, he knew he was about to die, and he knew that there was nothing he could do to stop it. The game was over, the confrontation had begun, and Juniper Black was about to deliver her final verdict. Juniper drew her revolver, the cold steel glinting in the afternoon sun. She pointed it directly at Harrison's heart, her hand steady, her eyes unwavering. "You want to know why I did this?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "You want to know why I've been hunting you down one by one? I'll tell you why." She lowered the gun slightly, her gaze piercing Harrison's soul. "My name is Juniper, Juniper of Willow Creek, and your friends, you murdered my family. You burned my home, you stole my life, and for years you've lived free, fat, and happy while I've been haunted by the ghosts of the past." She raised the gun again, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I gave you a chance to confess, to atone for your sins, but you chose to hide, to lie, to pretend that you were innocent. You thought you could buy your way out of this. You thought your money and your power could protect you." She paused, her eyes filled with a cold, burning rage. "You were wrong. There is no escape from justice. There is no hiding from the past, and now it's time to pay the price." She took a deep breath, her voice softening slightly. "My mother's last words to me were, 'Survive, remember.' I survived, Harrison, and I remembered every face, every name, every detail, and I promised myself that one day I would make you all pay for what you did." "This isn't justice," Harrison stammered, his voice trembling. "This is revenge." Juniper smiled, a sad, weary smile. "Maybe it is, but sometimes revenge is the only justice there is." Harrison, tears streaming down his face, stammered, But why? Why go to all this trouble? Why not just disappear, start a new life, forget about the past?" Juniper's smile widened, a chilling, almost manic grin. "Forget? Never. And as for why, you still don't understand, do you?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It wasn't just about the men in Harmony Gulch, Harrison. It was about you. It was about Sterling and Davies. It was about the men who orchestrated the massacre, the men who profited from our misery, the men who built their empire on the ashes of Willow Creek." She stepped back, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You see, Harrison, I don't care about the railroad. I don't care about your money. I don't even care about Jedediah, the poor fool you framed. All I care about is making you suffer. All I care about is watching you squirm as you realize that everything you've built, everything you've worked for, is about to be taken away." She raised her revolver, her finger tightening on the trigger. "You thought you could hire me to protect you. You thought you could buy my loyalty. You were wrong. You just paid for your own execution." The truth dawned on Harrison, his eyes widening in horror. It wasn't just about revenge for the past, it was about destroying their future. It wasn't about money, it was about power, and Juniper Black was about to take it all away. The shot rang out, shattering the afternoon silence. Harrison crumpled to the ground, a single bullet wound piercing his heart. Justice, or perhaps revenge, had been served. Sterling and Davies arrived the following day, summoned by a terse telegram from O'Malley, informing them of Harrison's untimely demise at the hands of the still-at-large Jedediah. They were met by Juniper, her face a mask of professional concern. She led them on a carefully orchestrated tour of the outpost, pointing out the progress on the railroad, the dedication of the workers, the imminent completion of the project. She spoke of Jedediah's treachery, his depravity, his unwavering commitment to destruction. She played her part perfectly, the grieving but determined tracker committed to bringing the killer to justice. That night, under the cloak of darkness, she led them to their deaths, one by one, each demise carefully crafted to appear as the work of the elusive Jedediah. The railroad barons, the architects of Willow Creek's destruction, were finally silenced. With her mission complete, Juniper Black vanished into the frontier, leaving behind a scene of cold, calculated justice. The railroad would be completed, the line would be connected, and the empire would continue to grow. But the memory of Willow Creek would linger, a haunting reminder of the price of greed and the power of revenge. And somewhere out there in the vast, unforgiving wilderness, Juniper Black would continue to roam, a ghost of the past, a symbol of defiance, a legend whispered in hushed tones around campfires for generations to come. Her work was done, but her spirit would endure.